Tiled furniture has been super popular across TikTok and social media lately, but I wanted to downsize it for people that maybe are a little bit intimidated to create their own furniture piece, so we are going to be creating some tile coasters. I got these 2x2 square tiles from a shop in Los Angeles called Home Decor, and I cut them out into 2x2 sections to create a small little coaster, and I went ahead and adhered them to a piece of corkboard just because I felt like the cork would be a nice material to kind of sit on top of any tabletop, and the tile will not scratch it. So I adhered those down first on all of my coasters, and went ahead and make sure that they were nicely attached, and then cut them out using an X-Acto knife or a pair of scissors. I brought out some acrylic paint just to see how this would work on top of the tiles, and I can tell you guys it worked perfectly. All I did was 2 to 3 even coats of this acrylic paint on top of the tiles and also on the sides there. So this is my second coat that I'm applying on, using my heat tool to dry it down. And then what I actually did was went in with a Mod Podge hard coat and did 2 full coats of this hard coat across the entire top and sides of our coaster. This makes it water and weather resistant. And then I brought out my grout, which I've used in a lot of different projects that I've done tiling in the past. This is just a nice warm gray grout, so I applied it with my finger into the grout lines, just kind of evenly dispersing it, wiping away any of the excess. And then what I did in the end was I actually used a little bit of caulking and I just applied it to the sides to give it a nice clean finish, and that finishes off these coasters. Now here is another project using a joint compound. I'm going to be using a canvas and also a spatula and a couple of acrylic paints. So essentially we are going to be mixing up, and I think this is such an aesthetically pleasing project. It just is so nice to watch it be done. I mixed up some paint with some joint compound to create a very thick kind of essentially paint that I then went ahead and spatulaed onto a canvas. So I kind of wanted to do a variation of colors. There was no rhyme or reason to this, but I think it would be really cute if you had an accent color in your space to do like an ombre. So making it the darkest shade it could be to start, and then kind of working your way towards a lighter shade as you go on. So I just did a kind of variance of different colors, some soft yellows, oranges, pale greens, a little bit of pink, and then just a natural joint compound at the bottom there. You're going to want to let this dry, and once it has dried, you have a cute little decor piece. I think this next project is one of my favorite pillow DIYs that I've done on this channel. I think it just turned out so cute. I basically ended up using some of this wool roving yarn and cutting them into 3 strip sections because I'm going to be ending up braiding them and turning them into little pieces that we're going to be decorating on top of the pillow. So I started off by tying a knot and leaving just a little bit of a tail on there because we're actually going to be using that as a tassel in the future. And I'm just going ahead and doing a simple braid down this entire section here. Now you're going to need 6 pieces that are 14 inches braided length, and then you're going to need 2 sections that are 4-foot braided length. So once you have all of your strands created here, you're going to go ahead and start decorating your pillow. I'm going to be using Fabri-Tac adhesive, which is a fabric glue that works really great, and kind of following this pillow that I found on Wayfair, but it was $120, and I was like, we can easily create this for way less. I think this project ended up costing around $15 to create, and I used my Fabri-Tac to adhere down my little strips along the front of the pillow. Once I reached the end as well, I went ahead and I just tied them in a knot. That way I kind of had a little bit of a tassel hanging off the side of the pillow, and as you can see here, I'm cutting those tassel edges, and that really finishes off this pillow. It turned out so freaking cute in the end, and I think this is a really fun project. Here is a super simple DIY for a really cute kind of photo holder or Polaroid holder. All I did was I grabbed some white and black clay that I'm going to be using to create the little holders themselves. So I started off by just working the clay in my hands, making it a little bit warm and kind of forming it into a pyramid shape using some dental floss to create a line down the center. That little dental floss line that we created is going to be able to hold your photo. You can kind of slip it in that line once it is baked. I also went ahead and used some black clay because I wanted to create almost a marbled looking one. So I mixed together a little bit of black, or I guess a lot of black, and a little bit of white to create more of a black based marble pattern. So I twisted it up, kind of molded it into the shape that I wanted it to be in, used my dental floss to again cut a line and just create the nice edges on that pyramid shape there. Popped them on a cookie sheet and just baked them in the oven for about 20 minutes, I would say. And then once they came out, you can add any additional details you would like on there as well. So I went ahead and wrapped one of them with some washi tape and used a little bit of my brass gilding paint to go ahead and paint the top of it as brass. Allow that paint to dry, and you can slip your photos or Polaroids in these and store them on a desk or shelf. This next project is a shell trinket tray with a little bit of an artistic touch. So I basically went ahead and found these large shells on Amazon, and I'm going to be using the inverse of the shell to create some small trinket trays. On this first one, I'm using some black acrylic paint just to almost create like a Dalmatian spotted abstract pattern. On the second one that I'm doing here, this one's going to be a little bit more funky. I'm kind of following a retro modern pattern and using some pastel tones to map out the pattern on the inside. I'm just doing some horseshoe shapes, kind of some fish shapes, some rings, some lines, some clouds, whatever you have, you can just create them as you would like to. I also went ahead and kind of created this pink ombre shell, and then you're going to want to seal the entire piece, that way it's nice and finished off. So I'm using the same Mod Podge hard coat I used on those tile coasters, going in and just painting the hard coat on the top. I suggest doing 2 full coats of this. Once you have it dried down, you have your finished off little shell trinket trays. Whenever I would go to the dollar store, I would always see these hula hoops, and I finally picked one up and decided I'm going to be creating a DIY with this. So I ripped off the exterior pink and silver lining, and I spray painted the hoop black to start, and then I used these campfire skewers that are also from the dollar store, and I applied a little bit of wood stain to them. So using the early American wood stain, I just wanted to warm them up a little bit as they were kind of more on the yellow side, and then I used my industrial scissors to go ahead and cut these down to the lengths that I wanted them to be. These are basically going to be 2 different strips in the middle section that we are going to be applying some yarn to. So for our underside, we're going to be applying this more tan tone. So I did 2 to 3 strips per section and just kind of lark's head knotted it onto our dowel there. Moving on to the white section on top, I did the same exact thing with the white roving yarn, and I glued down the 2 different sections so that they overlaid each other, and also created this little section at the top that kind of created a triangle. And overall, I feel like it really just unified the piece as one. It kind of before just looked like I had some random yarn strands hanging there, but when I added that top piece, it really made the full section look like it was complete. I used a little bit of tape and a steamer to go ahead and steam my strands and cut them into a nice blunt cut, and that finished off our wall decor. I absolutely loved the way this wall decor piece turned out. It was so freaking cute. So I went ahead and started off by taking this little wood balsa wood piece that I got at the craft store, and I cut it into a 2-foot long section. So using my saw, I cut that down, and then I went ahead and I cut a ton of pieces of macrame cording at the same exact length. I believe for this project, I cut them to about 4-foot long sections, but you can totally alter it as you would like to. And using some hot glue, I went ahead and started placing down my strips. Now you're going to want to figure out how many strips you want to have in your first section, because we are then going to be transferring them over to the opposite side and gluing them down. So you're firstly going to want to figure out how long that section of macrame glued down is. It was about 10 inches, so I measured in 10 inches on the opposite side, so I knew where to start gluing down, because you're going to want to basically start with your first strand that you glued down, glue that first strand down to your 10-inch marked section on the opposite side, and continue along. Once you have them all glued down, you can actually bring this over to a dye bath and give it a nice dip dye. So I started off with a light color, kind of dipping it all the way in, adding a bit more dye, dipping it partial way in, adding a little bit more dye, and then dipping it a little bit of the way in. And then once you are fully finished with this piece, you can let it dry, and that finishes off your ombre macrame wall decor. Here we have another fun Lol Howls IKEA rug hack. This is using the same exact masking tape we used prior. This one is actually a little bit wider than that one, but I started off by taking a 12-inch strip and finding the exact center of the rug and placing down my 12-inch strip in a horizontal fashion. Once you have your 12-inch strip placed down, everything else just kind of comes from there. You're going to want to go ahead and place down your tape as shown here. Now, I just went ahead and made sure that every section that did not have tape was exactly 2 knots wide. That way, when we sprayed our black on there was more of the actual natural part of the rug as opposed to the black there. I wanted the black to be a little bit more just like not as present as the natural jute itself. So I went outside, sprayed it with some black spray paint so that way all those sections were covered, brought it back inside once it was dried, and pulled off all that tape to reveal your brand new rug pattern. This one ended up being a really cool kind of abstract geometric rug, and I love the way that it turned out. This was actually a project that I created out of need for this specific piece. I really wanted a cement tissue box holder, so I decided why don't I go ahead and create my own. So I went ahead and I mixed Mod Podge with cement mix. So my reasoning behind this was I felt like if I was just go ahead and mix up the concrete as you normally would with some water, it would probably just fall right off the exterior of our tissue box holder. So I went ahead and I mixed it up with Mod Podge to kind of create more of a pasty glue material, which I was then able to brush on top of this raw wood box, which I found at Michael's craft store. So I went ahead and I started by painting a generous coat of our cement paint on the outside here. I think this is a really great technique too, because you can really give anything a nice cement coat finish, like whether it be a table lamp or something thrifted, you can actually give it a pretty decent cement coat with some Mod Podge and some cement powder. Just let it dry and you're good to go. Wow, you guys, we have made it to project 90, and this one is a really, really cute one. I ended up getting this bubble mold off of Amazon. It is basically a bubble candle mold, and I went ahead and I started off by piercing a hole in the bottom middle using an embroidery needle. That way I was able to string a wick through this area because I'm going to be melting down some of this soy wax in a double boiler method where you basically take a pot, fill it halfway up with water, and then put your wax inside of a vessel that is glass or whatever material you have. You're going to place this in the inside of the pot and melt it down as you go. So just kind of melting it down slowly and gradually until you have all of the wax melted. And I also knew that I wanted to add color to this candle. So I started off with the brown kind of oversaturated wax pellets. I found these on Amazon. They are basically just meant for coloring your wax candles. So I went ahead and I dropped a couple drops of the brown in there. And then it was time to go ahead and pour the wax into our mold. So as you can see here, I kind of created my very own mold holder with a paper cup. However, I do not suggest this because the weight of the wax inside of here actually ended up indenting the underside of that cup into our candle. So as you can see here, I went ahead and I applied a clothespin to hold the wick in place. I let the wax fully cool, but as I took this one out, I love the color, by the way. It's like a deep caramel color. As I took it out, you can see that all of the top ball edges just kind of got indented. So I ended up making a second one a little bit lighter in shade, and this one was perfect. I love the way that these candles turned out.